All right, hey, what's up? It's Andrew. Sorry this is late, but you know what? It's the doldrums of summer. My thoughts have turned to those of fancy. Certainly not vlogging. That's what they have not turned to. All right. So maybe I'm gonna try and do this in one take, as my pal Tranna Wintour does. No, I'm not gonna do that. No, I'll need to stop and start so many times, simply because I drink during well, hey. So this week's theme is how I got started in comedy. Well, how we all got started in comedy, but specific. Well, I'm sure I have the most interesting story, which I have told 100 times. So this should be pretty streamlined. The first time that I did stand up comedy was back when I was in high school, which fuck, for all intents and purposes of people watching this, who I assume are on skew younger, back when the Titanic was setting sail, and back during the Korean War. I entertained the troops. The first time that I did stand up, it had never really occurred to me. Well, it didn't occur to me. I'm sure it would have occurred to me. It's difficult to say, but what happened was, back at the time, I was. Oh, do I want to say the number or do I want to just say the year? No, I'm going to say the number because I've already said back in high school. So when I was 17, I will not correlate which year that was because I'm really trying to put a lot of different fraudulent numbers out there to really scramble things. So like somewhere I have it listed that it's like in the 40s, which it's so not, and then somewhere else I have it like it's like in the lower 20s. I just really want to fuck people. When it comes, it's like, oh, just we have all these different sources saying this, different, so they'll just maybe go with what I tell them, and we'll see which number I give them at the time where it's an issue. Anyway, so I was 17 the first time that I stepped on stage, and it was at the behest of a good friend of mine in high school. Her name is Katie Flagg. I believe she goes by as she's a singer-songwriter now and goes by the stage name, the moniker Murica. I don't know. I really haven't spoken to her in years, but thank God for her because I wouldn't have been doing stand-up. Well, who knows? The jury's out as to whether I would. I have theories. In any event, she was running what we called the Coffee House, which was a noon hour fundraiser for Grad Club. I don't even know why it was called the Coffee House. There wasn't coffee served at it. There wasn't anything served at it. I guess it just was meant to replicate the sort of intimacy of coffee houses where people could come and sit on the floor and girls with guitars would play. But anyone could get up and do anything, and she had said to me, she's like, well, like, just for variety's sake, I'm gonna sign you up to do stand-up. And I'm like, what? And she's like, no, I think you should do stand-up, because I was always very routinely anecdotal. Listen to me talking about myself as a teenager like I was anything, like I knew what the fuck was going on. But I think that that's a trait that I had, was that I was routinely anecdotal. I was very colorful. I would whatever. When I say routinely anecdotal, do you know what that means? It means that, like, I would tell stories, but they would always have beats in them and whatever, and I would tell them to a variety of people, whatever, and they would always roughly be the same. Like, people could listen to me tell the same story, and they're like, I've heard this one, I've heard this before, but it would always be like, blah, 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 and then, not blah, 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 and then, blah, 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 because, blah, 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 point, joke, whatever. So there was just sort of that natural comedy DNA into me already. And so she said, I'm going to sign you up to do stand-up. And I was like, I'm not going to do it. I can't do stand-up. She's like, well, I signed you up, so you need to do it. And I was like, okay. That's like literally, I signed you up on a sheet of foolscap. And then I did it. Just because of that. All it takes sometimes is someone doing that. Is a good friend of yours just being like, well, I signed you up. I'll be there. You're doing it. And you show up and you do it. And so I did it for the first time when I was 17. I probably did 10 minutes, maybe. I don't really know. Like, I don't know. You have no concept of time when you're younger. You have, like, when you're a younger comic, I mean. Or if it's one of your first times on stage. A lot of, like, people are like, I could never do stand-up. I could never be up there for 5 minutes. I'm like, oh, you could. You'd be amazed. You'd be amazed. You would be up there for a lot longer than that because you have no concept of being in front of an audience and how short 5 minutes is, but like how difficult it is to do well in that time frame. Anyway, so I must have done about 10 minutes, and half of it was easily just bits and pieces cobbled together from Kathy Griffin's second HBO special called Hot Cup of Talk, which I had a satellite dish, and I'm in Canada if any Americans are watching this, so that HBO was not accessible to Canadians, so I knew that no one would see it. I absolutely lifted some things from her act verbatim, and that's the only time that I ever stole from anyone, because you shouldn't do that. But I mean, if you're 17, fucking imitation is the highest form of flattery at that age. And so I did it. I killed. It was like a revelation. It was like a revelation. It was great. But I mean, also to a captive audience of sober high school kids. Well, I don't know how sober some of them would have been because, like drinking mouthwash was a really big epidemic in my high school. But yeah, and so that went really well. And every other time that I did high school shows, it went really well. And I would host variety nights and stuff like that. And I would do stand up there. And I was known as like Brockville Collegiate Institute's BCI's stand-up comic. And then story, I went to university. I didn't do very much stand-up there. I did a lot of sketch there, which I think is a very common story, especially among queer comedians. I think everyone who's been on this week, certainly Vicki, Ashley, and then guest star Philip Jeremick yesterday. I think that a lot of queer people who are comedically inclined gravitate towards sketch. But in any event, I always knew that I was gonna pursue stand-up at some point. I just knew from doing it, I knew just the sort of carrot that was dangled in front of my face, as that maybe it's a reference to an Aesop's fable. I don't know, the carrot and the stick. Anyway, but I knew that carrot that was dangled, I knew that I was gonna have to, see what that was about. And also, sketch involves a lot of meaning and a lot of committee thinking and giving the floor to people to express their opinions, and I have no fucking patience for that shit. So fuck that, thanks. I'll live by my own devices. Thank you. So when I moved to Toronto, which was a while ago, it was like a decade ago. Yeah. It was a decade ago. Anyway, I had been dabbling at stand-up. I started working, my very first job actually in the city was working for this unit publicist. So when I say unit publicity, what they would do is they go on set and they do promotion for the film while it's in town, and they also put together the DVD extras, basically. They do all the interviews with the people, the EPKs they're called, the electronic press kits. And so while I was at this job, I got to conduct some of these interviews with such luminaries as Sean Patrick Flannery, Powder, Stephen Baldwin. I brought up Threesome. Oh yes. Jacqueline Bissett, not Bissett. Bissett, do you remember that crazy lady who won that Golden Globe a few years ago and took 5 minutes getting on stage and then said, as my mother used to say, fuck them in the ass. Good night, whatever. She did something like that. Yep, had to deal with her. And as it turns out, the woman who hired me for that, she used to be the call-in girl, the Tuesday call-in girl. Oh, God. She used to be the administrative assistant who would receive the call-ins for the open mics at Yuck Yucks. And when I told her that I did stand-up, because I always called myself a stand-up, like when I wasn't doing, arguably I wasn't. I was very, oh God, I was an aspiring stand-up at that point. But of course I called myself one. And there's a lot of these bullshit, aspiring people do. Because I wasn't doing. But I said that I did stand-up. She's like, well, I used to work at Yuck Yucks, so I can get you on Tuesdays if you want. And I was like, well, it's really hard. Like, I've tried, like, a lot. And I had never called it. But she's like, well, ring-a-ding-ding. She called the CEO, Jeff Silverman, and was just like, hey, can Andrew get on? He called me back, and that is unheard of. He called me and was like, you're on this Tuesday. And I was like, what? As it turns out, that Tuesday that I got on, and by the way, I had done a few other shows between this and high school, right? Like, I had some material. Like, I had at least a, 10-minute little routine. Anyway, the Tuesday that I got on happened to be the preliminaries, like the local Toronto preliminaries for what happened to be the inaugural year of the Great Canadian Laugh-Off, which was a comedy competition put on the Comedy Network here, and $25,000 grand prize, whatever. And each city was going to have a little round of local primaries, and there would be a representative from each city where there was a Yuck Yucks club. I had no idea, so I went there, and I just, told some friends of mine, oh, I'm doing stand-up at Yuck Yucks this night, because I hadn't been doing it that often. I think the year prior I had done it like 4 times or something like that. I don't know. And so I went that night, and I won, because there are just natural gifts some people are bestowed. And I moved on to what became like the Toronto Regional's 16 comics, a lot of which, went on to phenomenal success. And I won that too. And that's the only fucking thing I've ever won. That's the only thing. I peaked in 2000 motherfucking 5, and it's all just been a slight downhill sled from there. But, so that happened, and that really launched me into comedy. I got signed to the Yucks roster after that, and 10 fucking years later, here we are. Anyway, thank you so much for tuning in, and we will, as Vicki said, see you on September 14th. Hopefully I'll be thinner.